Our top story, the West is working to speed up deliveries of ammunition to Ukraine. The NATO chief has warned that Ukraine is using up ammunition far faster than its allies can provide. The fighting is consuming vast quantities of ammunition, straining stockpiles and industries on both sides of the confrontation. In the embattled East, Russia is ramping up its offensive. It has a clear edge in artillery thanks to a bigger number of howitzers and rocket launchers and abundant ammunition as well. NATO says the immediate priorities are clear. The issues of air defense and ammunition resupply are much more important than talks on fighter jets.
Was that the current rate of ammunition consumption is bigger than the current rate of production. That's a factual thing. But since we have been aware of that for some time, we have started to do something. We're not just sitting there idle and watching this happening.
For months, the US and other NATO members have sent weapons and equipment to Ukraine. Allies continue to raid their shelves for the rounds, especially 155mm shells that Ukraine is firing by the thousands every day. According to some estimates, Ukraine is firing up to 6,000 to 7,000 artillery shells every day. In perspective, that's around one-third of the daily amount that Russia is using almost 1 year into the war. The war has strained the already depleted weapons stockpiles of many European nations. Some allies have sent all Soviet-era weaponry and are now waiting for US replacements. Estonia provided the equivalent of one-third of its defense budget to Ukraine. Norway has provided more than 45% of its stock of howitzers. Slovenia committed nearly 40% of its tanks. The Czech Republic sent about 33% of its multiple rocket launcher systems. As per estimates, the Ukraine war has reduced the US stockpiles of Javelin anti-tank weapons by as much as one-third and Stinger missile inventories by 25%. The war has also put pressure on artillery supplies because the US manufactured M777 howitzer is no longer in production. NATO is now scrambling to get its factories to pump out more. Allies are eyeing plans for joint weapons purchases, higher defense spending and longer-term contracts. And then there is another worry. Ensuring ammunition resupply and increasing weapon supplies is one, but how do you get them through? Currently, there are three main transportation hubs used to gather equipment going into Ukraine in Poland, Slovakia and Romania. Military experts are calling for a major effort to move supplies off bases and to the border quickly. There are concerns the arteries will get backed up and the weaponry will get stuck. On the other hand, President Putin can order Russian weapon makers to go into 24 hours production. Russia has already directed some of its troops to the factories instead of the front lines. Georgia in 2008, Crimea in 2014, and now the Ukraine invasion. Russia reconstitutes its military rapidly. Kiev fears Moscow is planning to mount a new deadly offensive in the spring. Russia and Belarus have beefed up their joint military grouping with weapons, soldiers and specialized equipment. The US Defense Secretary said Ukraine is looking to turn the tide on the battlefield to gain momentum. The West expects Kiev's forces to launch their own counter-offensive in the spring. For more on this story, we're now joined by Joachim Bitterlich. He is an ex-NATO ambassador and was a direct advisor to German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. So thanks very much for joining us here on WION. The question that I want to primarily ask you is that, NATO has already said that they are finding it very difficult to continue this supply chain of ammunitions. The NATO chief has said that the current rate of ammunition consumption by Ukraine is much higher than the current rate of production by these countries. So the question simply is, even as country after country pledges uninterrupted support to Kiev, how are they planning to keep up?
Well, it's a matter of fact that the NATO member states, especially in Europe, have had in the past, let's say, a low reserve on ammunition. Example, Germany, 2-3 days, France, maximum 8 days. And even our British friends are actually teaching the Ukrainians to use weapons and artillery in a more, let's say, economic way when they do it. They do it up till now, let's say, more or less in the old good Soviet way. Maximum of fire, if you want. And they have still to learn to some extent. It's true, the Western world has certain problems, let's say, to deliver the numbers, the high numbers of ammunition the Ukrainians need. And there is one ally in the West.
All right, we seem to have lost a line there to Mr. Okim Bitterlake. All right, Mr. Bitterlake, if you could hear me, please go ahead, sir, complete your thought.
No, because I hear you well. I see the internet relation is not the most stable between India and Europe. Well, we have to improve there. As the NATO member countries have to improve their delivery of ammunition to Ukraine. But at the same time, the Ukrainians have to learn, let's say, to use ammunition in a bit more, let's say, economic way. And the British are training them in this regard. But I'm sure the NATO member states, especially through the Americans, will deliver to them the necessary quantities on ammunition. But there are these ways and means have to be improved rapidly. This is true. And therefore, let's say this was one of the subjects of the meeting of defense ministers of NATO, and especially in the Ramstein format, with the Ukrainians to see how to improve the ways, and you have mentioned it, going through Poland, through Romania, and through Slovakia.
Okay, let me ask you this. At this stage, who do you think has the upper hand on the battlefield, Russia or Ukraine, with all the Western support that it enjoys? And also, let's not forget, the first anniversary of this war is now just days away. Why is nobody talking about returning to the negotiating table? How much longer can this war really go on for?
Well, actually, if you describe the actual situation and you put aside a bit what's information and disinformation on both sides, I think it's advantage Ukraine. It's clear up to now, and it remains clear, that the Russians are not able to reach their goals from the beginning. On the other hand, the Ukrainians would like to put them outside of their recognized territory. This means even in the out of the eastern region of Donbass and out of Crimea. This is the wish of the Ukrainians. And you mentioned peace talks. You know, if you want to reach peace talks, both sides have to save at least their face, if you want.
All right, so what can that face saver really be? As we mentioned, the first anniversary of this war is round the corner, but there is at the moment absolutely no end in sight to this war. Okim Bitterlake, thank you very much for sharing your perspective with WION.